We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. Oh Lord, I bow at your feet. Please bless this mendicant that he to mountain retreat. You patrons here of your auspicious connection, accomplishing the good of self and others. It's hard to come by an easily lost body. It's well because it's met with your provisions. The richness of the earth with its fruits and grain, and the deep blue sky with its mist and rain, are the connections that benefit to beings. The heart of this connection is the Dharma divine. The illusion of a body brought up by parents, and the Guru's instructions so profound, are the connections that cause the Dharma to grow. The heart of this connection is called heartedness. My caves in wild uninhabited valleys, and my Dharma practice that is not mere words, are the connections for accomplishing my true heart wish. The heart of this connection is emptiness. Milarepa's endurance in meditation, and the faith of beings in all three realms, are the connections for the benefit of every being. The heart of this connection is compassion. The yogin who meditates on rocky peaks, and the patrons providing his sustenance, are the connections for us all to awaken together. The heart of this connection is the sharing of Punya. The compassion of a kind and genuine good, and the patient meditation of good disciples, are the connections for holding the Dharma firm. The heart of this connection is Samaya. The Abhisheka with swift Adhisthana, and our heartfelt and fervent prayers, are the connections for our quickly meeting again. The heart of this connection is auspiciousness. The essence of Akshobhya, Lord Bhadrahara, please know the joys and sorrows of this mendicant. So, start explaining some of that this morning, but before I do that, I'll do the last of the questions for yesterday. So, in our group it was expressed that Dharma friendships are different in quality from everyday friendships. And do you think this is so? And it's really important that they are different, isn't it? Because if you had an everyday friendship that had that Dharma quality in it, it would be a Dharma friendship, isn't it? And that Dharma quality is what we've been talking about in terms of mandala principle of drawing out the teaching, drawing out our understanding. When we can talk to other people about our developing understanding and our experience, it helps us to access it in ourselves, and also it helps the other person because they're inspired by that, even by what's negative. In a sense, we may be feeling, I'm not having a good experience, and you share it with somebody, and it might be that they're having an even worse experience, and it already helps them to know, oh, so it doesn't always go like it's supposed to go, you know, like, and then you can really open up and talk about, well, what, you know, what's going wrong, and maybe give you the confidence to go further and ask your mentor or teacher for more guidance. Sometimes if you're just handling, you know, something that's not quite working, and you know it's not working because you're feeling dull and blocked, and it isn't, you know, nothing's inspiring about it. But then you think, oh well, you're just supposed to, you know, not supposed to trouble the teacher until you've got something important to say, and this isn't important, but of course it is important because, you know, something's not moving along in the right kind of way. You can feel it. I mean, yes, sometimes we can get impatient and we want results. But then, if you go to the teacher, they'll tell you that, you know, that what's happening is that you want result, you're attached to result. But other times you go to the teacher and you say, well, I'm just sitting there, and I've been sitting like this for a long time, and I'm just dulling out. It seems like a bit of a waste of time, and that is an important thing to take to the teacher and talk about it. But maybe by having a conversation with a Dharma friend about that would really get you to recognise, oh, you know, that's what I need to do. But it can be on all sorts of levels. You know, if you have a Dharma friend, you know, you're going through difficulties, and the Dharma friend is going to be talking about it in a Dharma kind of way. Whereas your other friends are probably going to say other because we define them as not Dharma friends, are going to be talking to you in kind of worldly terms, which it can be very confusing because, you know, we're quite worldly people, so we're easily distracted by worldliness. So it's really helpful to have Dharma friends who can kind of help to bring us back on track. So yes. And sometimes they really pull you up sharp, don't they? Because, you know, you're beginning to wallow in something, and your Dharma friend can sort of say, well, that isn't really Dharma, is it? And you think, oh, you're right. You did know, you could say, well, you didn't need your friend to tell you, but actually you needed reminding. So there's so many ways in which a Dharma friendship is invaluable. And also that sense that the friendships we cultivate are the ones that are going to, you know, karmically are going to be the strongest ones. So that we want, again and again, to meet with Dharma friends. We want to always be surrounded by Dharma friends, because then our tendencies, you know, if we're all surrounded by Dharma friends, our good tendencies are always going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Made stronger. Augmented, reinforced and augmented, yes. So that's why when we take refuge, we make this thing that we're not going to take refuge in worldly people, but we're going to take refuge in really people who are going to really help us in the Dharma. You know, it doesn't mean you have to reject worldly people, but you have to make sure you're not being negatively influenced by them. You know, if you're with them and you're actually having a good influence on them, that's not. And if you're not being badly influenced by them. But if you actually find you're getting in company that is reinforcing your own negativity, you know, that's not helping anyone, is it? So, yeah, Dharma friendships are what it's about. And if our heart connections are outside time, well, they're just not in time. I don't know if time has an outside. And space. How do we interact with them or affect them? Well, they're not outside, are they? That's the whole point. They're not in space, they're not in time. So you're not separate from them. So, I mean, what is the question? How can we interact with them? Well, we are. You know, they are intrinsic to what we are. So they're right, like with a heart connection. It's not in time. You know, I will love you forever. I find that so interesting. People do say it, don't they? People who have no kind of belief system that would support such a statement will say, I will love you forever. And I think there's a very deep intuition that love is not in time. The heart is not in time. So you can say that. It is of the nature that it's not going to change. That's what we're saying, isn't it? It's not going to change. It can't change because it's of the nature, it's the heart connection. So everything we do, as we honour that, is affecting that relationship. So when there's nothing blocking it, okay, we have the same connection with all beings, but with most beings there's quite a lot of things getting in the way. But there are those people where there's not much getting in the way. So we feel that very alive quality. And you don't have to do anything about it, do you? You don't have to make it. But if something's threatening to get in the way, maybe you're reacting to something that they said or did, and you're starting to pull away, it's very painful, isn't it? It's more painful than if you already had a lot of blockage in regard to them. Then don't notice the extra but so much. But when it's really been very open and delightful and then something gets in the way, you can't help but interact with that, can you? Because it's so uncomfortable, so painful, it probably obsesses you. You can't stop. You can't get away from it. You can't sort of, it doesn't matter. It's right there in the core of your being. So it's good, it wakes you up. A bit of dukkha, nothing like a bit of dukkha, is it? Dukkha, pain, discomfort. Discomfort in a very profound way. Because how do we know that's uncomfortable? How do we know that's if you like, wrong? It's our Buddha nature that's telling us that. That blockage. It shouldn't be there. It needs to be removed. We know that. We don't need anyone to tell us that. We might try various strategies around it, but it's not going to work, is it? That pain is there, so they do affect you. They affect you more than anything, which we also know, don't we? When somebody's widowed or lose a child or something like that, we know how painful that is. It's no good saying, well, it's only a child, it had to die sometime. It's just not how it works, is it? It's interesting, nonetheless we do think we are in time and space, don't we? Keeps coming back, this sense that we're at a certain time and a certain place, and that other person is a certain time and a certain place, and there's this gulf between us. And you go and see Khenpo Rinpoche and sort of looks at you and tells you, well, there is no distance, there is no time and space. What was it I asked him? I must do something. There is no time, there is no space. Yes, sir. I didn't have time to do something, I think I said. And he just said, well, there is no time. End of conversation. It's easy to say, oh, we're all Buddhas. But people sort of like that idea, and it's more like that sentiment, that you think of everybody as Buddhas. Oh, that's lovely, they're all good and they're all nice. Actually, they're all Buddhas. Actually, Buddhas, what are the qualities of Buddhas? They're not just nice. I mean, that's what I was saying yesterday, isn't it? They're outside of time and space. No, I shouldn't say outside, because there is no outside. But having said there's no outside, they're not in time and space. So they're everywhere. They're totally accessible all the time. And that's our nature. That's quite shocking, isn't it? we think we're nicely contained in one little spot where we're quite, we protect the world from ourselves because, we can't be doing any harm because we're nicely sort of held in a nice little spot. So we're not doing any harm, and maybe we can save ourselves from being harmed. It's complete nonsense. You're totally present everywhere. Well, nobody can get away from you. You can't get away from anyone. It's a nice, comforting thought, isn't it? Nonetheless, because we're all deluded and we all think we're in time and space, we can use various strategies to kind of fool people that we've moved away. So, but actually in ourselves we have to know we haven't really. So if something in a situation was very negative and harmful and you remove yourself, there's part of you that looks at the irony of that, because actually you can't. That connection is there, even if it's a negative one. But you can use a clever strategy for the time being. I'm in this a separate mandala where I can keep a certain distance and manageable. I can manage the situation better, so we choose a situation we feel we can manage better. But it's good to remember I haven't really separated from that person. So I can continue to make good pranidhanas. Next time we meet, we'll be able to help each other. Obviously, the way we're meeting at the moment, we're not helping each other, but if all future lives, may we meet again and again and be able to help each other through the power of our connection, which is obviously very strong if we've actually taken the trouble to remove ourselves from their presence. It's obviously a very strong connection. So we can really make use of those negative relationships. Kind of almost rejoice that, I haven't been able to be indifferent to this person. I have this strong connection. Then questions from Dorji's group about our connections with difficult people. Oh, there you are. Preempted it. Bad connections, and how can we honour these? Maybe I've answered that. Good. If people notice a change in me, I know it's at least partly to do with my practice, but I don't necessarily flag it up to them. As the case, I wonder if I should acknowledge the Dharma openly to others. I don't think it's a bad idea, is it? If somebody says, oh, you're much nicer than you used to be, you say, well, you can thank the Dharma for that. You can thank the Dharma for that. I say, oh, it's this Dharma stuff then, that's, yeah. Yeah. Give them a good connection with it, wouldn't it, if they've already said they like the change. So, while certain connections in a personal mandala are very strong, is there a sense that on some deeper level, all our connections with all other beings are equal? It's interesting, isn't it? Yes, you could say they're all equal. And as I said earlier, but the ones that we feel most strong are the ones where they're least in the way. But every connection has the potential to feel that strong. It just depends on what's in the way. And also, a lot depends on the configuration of the mandala that's manifesting in the foreground, if you like. So that in a family group, for example, people you feel a strong connection with are because they're in your family. And so it feels particularly strong, even if it's negative. And in that sense, it's like telling you this is the time. This is the time to work with that, that connection. Because you have this close, you're sort of all in the same house together and you've got to kind of deal with them. So that's actually made it a very strong connection, even though it's difficult. It's still a strong connection. and it's causing you a lot of grief, which shows it's very strong. As I said, then you can deal with it accordingly. So, if you want me to expand on anything more, just let me know.
Could you say a little bit more about family connections and the pain around it,
And how to make, probably you're not familiar with the term pranidhana, are you? You know, so what I'm saying is you can make a counter wish, you can make a wish in the direction, like if it's a difficult relationship, then you know, your tendency is to just want to pull away, say, oh, I can't deal with this, you know, I can't deal with it. Whereas you could actually think, okay, what I want to be able to do is really relate to this person in a good way. So you make that strong wish, and you sort of almost verbalize it to yourself even. May I be able to work with this person in a positive way in the future, in all future lives. May we have a good, positive experience. And you can see immediately my body language has changed, hasn't it? I'm kind of like, oh, may it be like that. I'm very resourced and ready. I haven't actually changed in a way. It's just I've adopted a different strategy. Like before I was thinking, oh, how can I get away? Well, you can remove yourself, but you can stand up and think, and may we always have a good connection in the future.
I just wanted, if I could ask you, connections with family who are alcoholic and quite abusive, but still wanting that connection, but knowing that it's really hard because you're on the receiving end of.
That's right. This is a good example, really, of where you do need to remove yourself, because it's not going to help them, and they're not going to help you. But if you've got this attitude, if you've got this open-hearted attitude towards them, the slightest move they make towards you in a way that you feel you could work with, you're ready. Because you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I'm all wounded and different, you know, I can't manage it. You're actually, well, I've removed myself, but my heart's really open to you, and I really wish that we could work well together. So you're ready. You're ready for any change in the circumstances, so that if, you know, you could help them, you would.
If somebody's using very abusive language to you, would you challenge that?
Depends if you think it's going to work. You know, if you feel, if you challenged it, they would stop to reflect. It's worth a try, isn't it? But if it's just going to escalate, you just have to assess, is this a battle worth fighting? Yeah. So if maybe this isn't the moment, maybe wait till they've calmed down and then have a word with them. Or, you know, you need to think carefully, not just react. But yeah, I mean, if you think there's some hope of getting through to them, you know, go for it. But, you know, be very careful that you're coming from this place of, you're not going to be defeated by this. You know, your heart is open, this is what you're wishing for. You know, they can make their choices in relationship to that, can't they? Oh, good. Are heart connections there without our effort? They arise on their own accord. They don't really arise, actually. They're just there, just like that. I find the image of a point in space really helpful in terms of understanding how heart connections work. Because, you know, we're having to use word, heart connection. Obviously it's inaccurate because you can't actually, it's not in time and space in any idea of connection we have. Unless we're talking about heart. It's kind of tied to time and space. But it's the same, we can talk about points. And I find this really interesting. We can talk about points, even a child can talk about a point. And yet, if you actually try to define a point, it has to be with no dimensions. If it has no dimensions, then what is it? And yet it's very precise, isn't it? It's this point and no other point. So what makes that point, and no other point, is the relationship of all the other points to that point. If you see what I mean. So points that are near that point are different from the points that are near to that point, even though they have no dimensions and no distance. So actually we're used to this. This is how we create our world all the time. We create our visual world. We think we join it together with points and lines, don't we? But actually, mathematicians are really curious about what a line is, really. How can you have a line if points have no dimensions? It's really interesting, isn't it? We keep forgetting that we're creating the lines and the points from an intuition that's deeper than the lines and the points. We kind of sense something there, a relationship, distance, and then we create a kind of model or image of it, which is a most direct line towards it. And then we kind of intuit that they're not all the same somehow, so we call them points. But actually, if they have that, if you can't have one point, how can you have more than one point? And yet, we create our world from points. We create engineering, everything else is all created from points. So I think that's a really good clue to how our mind creates things through, first of all, intuiting something very precise and real, and then creating a rough and ready image of it, which is our world around us that we live in. And because we've created that nice image of it, we can actually find our way around. So I can recognise, oh, that's Emma, that's selling room and so on. Actually, what people are is whole worlds without any limit in any direction. But I've pinpointed them by things that I can recognise, which is very clever. But unless I forget, that's what I've done. Which we do, don't we? Yeah?
It just occurred to me, you might add this to your way of talking about it, but actually when we use sat-navs, which we do all the time without really thinking about it, they never point to anything except a point. There isn't anything where a sat-nav says where you are. It just has you down as a point.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It happens to coincide with the street corner or the roundabout or whatever it is, but the sat-nav doesn't. The satellite doesn't know anything. It just points in space.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, it's all around us all the time. I remember talking to Kempa Namjo once, saying that Uxin Shikpo was talking about mathematics, and he said, yes, mathematics is around us all the time, isn't it? It's how everything works. And we forget, we sort of think, oh, this is an abstract thing that we don't really understand. I mean, actually, we understand it perfectly. Maybe we don't understand, maybe we can't put it into formula and follow the different sort of discussions that are going on, but we think that way all the time. And I find that really helpful to realise, yeah, that is just how the mind works. We know things, and then we create from that, and then we forget. This is just the rough and ready model for it. It's not the actual thing. That's not an actual person. That isn't the person. Well, that isn't the point. But it's helpful to get around in my deluded state to have these reference points, as it were. But I do believe it must be possible, this must be why Trungpa Rinpoche uses the term reference point. If you dropped all the reference points and you just had the space, and you were completely, if you like, at one with the space, you'd find everybody in a space. Probably much more accurately, actually. Just intuit everybody in the space. It'd be nice. It's a kind of quite exciting prospect, really, isn't it?
When you say you'd find everybody,
well, you'd access them.
why?
Well, if we wanted a conversation, because that would be fun, I could actually maybe even have a conversation with you without any words or even looking at you, and you would pick it up, and we'd have a good giggle. You know? Let's go off and help somebody.
So
We'd be inside each other in a way. We'd be completely interpenetrating with each other. So
it's something that discriminates.
yes, definitely, that's discriminating wisdom. Yeah.
There doesn't seem to be anything much else.
No, that's it. There's 5 wisdoms. Yeah, just the jnana. Having a good time. Finding helpful ways to help people and not getting the full fun out of it. How can we sort of wake them up so they can join in more? Yeah. So yes, they're always there. They're always there, but we tend to only recognise a few of them. That's what I'm saying, because there's things getting in the way. So that the ones that we really recognise and know are the ones where there's not too much getting in the way. And even the ones which are close and not much in the way, it can be quite intermittent, can't it? Like sometimes you're feeling very close and then sometimes you're really not, because something's got in the way. Mm-hmm. So we do have to make an effort to remove what's in the way. Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about when you say things are in the way, the connections are there,
Mm.
your eyes or
Mm.
I was wondering about enlightenment,
Mm.
when presumably all these veils
Mm.
do go,
Mm-hmm.
but you still spoke some time ago about Buddhas making connections, bodhisattvas making connections so that when they're Buddha fully awakened, they can specially help certain people, certain beings. But I was wondering, well, how come when all the veils are removed, all the connections are exposed, there still seems to be some kind of preference and some kind of
again
about kind of mandala.
That's right.
Structure.
There's still the mandala structure. It's like a point. So that point is always that point. So those points that are near it are always going to be in relationship to that point in that particular way, aren't they? So it's going to have the points that are nearest to it, or the inner circle. This is the hierarchy thing, isn't it? The ones that are nearest, and then the ones that are further away. Although that's not, it's just rough and ready because we're not really talking about time and space. But if we're using that as an example of the kind of thing we're talking about, this is how I understand it. I thought to think, well, that's why I sometimes question this thing where they say people use identity for self, and they say the Buddha said we don't have an identity, and I doubt that. I think we clearly do have an identity. There's no other point like our point. There's no other point that is our point. But our point is no different from any other point, and it's not separate from any other point. But it's that point, and it's unique in its relationships. So, point over there, what's near to that, using near and far, which is obviously not right because we're not talking about space and time, but relatively, using it metaphorically, points that are near to that and points that are near to that, the impact this point will have on this end is going to be different from the impact what's at this end, although actually they're all interpenetrating. So, they're not cut off from each other. This is how I play around with it in my mind. Nobody told me this. I just kind of think that must be what we're talking about. Because, when I've tried to ask myself these same questions, I've thought, it must be like that.
I'm puzzled.
Why there should be...
Well, or like what do we do when you're making connection with something?
Yeah, we're not really making connection. We're removing obstacles. But nonetheless, and you could help somebody that far away because it's not, but the way you would do it would be different from the way somebody that there would be. And yeah, I can see what you mean about there's a purpose in bodhisattvas sort of manifesting in worlds in order to create mandalas with people so that they have this kind of connection.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see why not. But obviously, because I'm not enlightened and I can't think without space and time, I can't really get it, really. But it makes sense to me that, you would create, like what's the word I like? A configuration. It's like we create configurations of relationships as we go through different lifetimes, and like with this woman with her baby and her dog, and those relationships. They're a configuration of relationships, but it's changing and looking different, but it's actually the same set of relationships. Something like that. Yes.
Lama, I use that sort of model where to try and explain to myself about a point, and yes, your connections, and we've all got different connections, and that's why you're distinct.
Mm.
But then, for me, it is a model, obviously,
Yeah.
but where that model falls down is once you start trying to impose that into penetration. Because
Impose it, did you say?
when you then think, if you're thinking about, if you take a point and you've got some points that are closer and some points are further away, and we're using that language.
Yeah.
But then when you think about interpenetration,
Yeah.
they can't be further away.
That's right.
And they can't be closer, so
That's right.
then it just goes out of the window for me.
Well, then you remember, it's a metaphor. It's like when you that mapping where you draw a small circle, and then you say, well, are there more points in the small circle or outside the small circle? So immediately you feel, well, there must be more outside. And then you can actually prove mathematically there is the same, exactly, for every point outside there's a point inside. So then you think, how's that possible? Because how can you squeeze them all? And you sort of start thinking they're all squeezed, the whole space is squeezed in. And then you think, oh no, hang on. I'm thinking that what I've drawn on the page as a point is what a point is, but of course I know it has no dimensions. I forgot. So the reason I can't think of it is because I can't break out of having given it a size.
Yeah, it's a bit like sort of mechanical reasoning where you apply it and then you get to a point where it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
I mean, you can use the concepts to take you so far, but then...
But it depends how you jump off. Because you could jump off, it all goes, you let go of all the concepts and it all becomes fuzzy and vague and unformed. Or you can think, oh, hang on, that was pointing at something really real that I've obviously intuited, but I've grasped it. So trying to just stay very simple with it, and then suddenly you remember the Mahayana Sutras and things like that, and the story of the yak horn and things like that, and you think, it is about this. Keep going with your formless practice.
One more question,
Yeah?
if I can. Another, you were saying far and near, like space, distance.
Yeah, we tend to.
We tend to, yeah.
Yeah, because we've forgotten it's a metaphor.
Yes, but another metaphor, far and near, is emotional.
Exactly.
distance.
Yeah.
So, and I have a question on that.
Yeah.
Because that appears as the mandala of connection,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Some people are further, some
Yeah,
are closer.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of that structure
Yeah.
of that and dynamics of that, and metta bhavana,
Yeah.
after manas, and like opening to all.
Yeah.
And how do those two, does it all become not like that? Some people are nearer, some far.
That's right.
If these mandalas are forever, and there's some meaning in some people being closer in some way.
In some ways.
In some way, but what is?
But not in some way.
Not in a grasping way.
Not in a grasping way. That's this really good example. The Apamanas is a really good example because you really are taking that idea of distance, emotional and even physical, and recognizing that in the heart it doesn't apply. And we all say that, don't we? You know, you hear of a disaster and you feel it in your heart. Your heart, we say, you know, heart goes out, or you take them to heart, because we know that actually it's not, there isn't a distance in that sense. But nonetheless, if you were operating in the world, the people that are around you, that you have in this, you know, what's in the foreground, if you're mandala at the moment, are those particular relationships. Some you will be able to operate and quickly, you know, you can give them some food and look after them. And some, you know, at this moment, that isn't what you're going to be able to do. So, you know, there is a difference, even though you could say those other people are not separate from your heart. And because they're not in the foreground, we tend to forget them. But we don't have to. That's another skillful ruse we have, another strategy we have for handling the fact that it's difficult to hold in our heart. But if we weren't so attached to it all as real, and we really could recognise the equalness of it, we would really be able to hold everyone in our hearts all the time.
Presumably that goes for Buddhism. We can talk about Buddha families and mandalas in fact, totally non-grasping, non-kind of...
That's right. And appearing in each other's mandalas. You know, like, apparently, I mean, I'm really looking forward to this bit, where you just think of a place and you're there. You know, I mean, it happens in the Bardo, but it's actually a reason why it shouldn't happen, and then we could go and visit somebody at the other side of the universe. Visit other Buddhas. How are you? Are your students being a nuisance? Can I help? So that's that. Is there a difference between thinking of all our life connections being anchored in the heart and or heart connections being those to which we feel more open-hearted? I think this is in response to now is the time to think of what heart connections mean. So does that mean that we're trying to think about, does heart connections mean our heart connections with all beings, or does it mean our heart connections that are special to us, now is the time to really value them? I think it means both. I think now is the time to think about that. Yes, I am connected to all beings. I am connected to the Buddhas. So now's the time to think that's what's important, my connections with, you know, mandala of awakening, a connection with all those people who are practicing Dharma, those people who, and then all those people who are close to me that I'm most able to help. For their sake, I now need to practice Dharma. So, yeah. It can motivate you to take refuge, it can motivate you to take refuge, take the Bodhisattva vow, to practice the Apamanas. I mean, it can motivate you, if you really think about those connections, it can motivate you, to really practice Dharma. So if you think about that, you realise, hang on, what's going to go with me? I'm going to die, could be today. What's important? What's going to go with me? And it's going to be what's your heart connections. So how am I going to make that good for myself, for the sake of all beings, and for those people that are close to me? You know, what's the best I can do for them? And that might be the most motivating thing, you know, that might really wake you up. I need to be able to help. When people are dying and, you know, they're ill or they need help, what goes beyond birth and death is what's important, and I want everyone to kind of recognise that, and I don't want to waste time myself. Because, traditionally you'd say, think about the four thoughts, when you turn your mind away from samsara. You sort of think about you have your precious human body, and that it might die any time, so use it while you've got it. And then what do you use it for? To make positive karmic actions so that you have good karmic results. And then actually you don't want just good karmic results, you want out of samsara. So you really think about what's what is the path, the Dharma. So that's a traditional way of doing it. But for us, I think it doesn't come to us so obvious and easy that we even believe in all the things that we're supposed to believe in as good Buddhists. And I just feel, well, you'd act like a good Buddhist if you thought carefully about your heart connections. Then you would actually naturally act like a good Buddhist. You would actually start to think, well, the only thing that matters is, heart essence, openness, clarity, sensitivity. Now is the time. Now, don't wait, because this might be your last chance in this lifetime. Make good use of it. Which is the same as thinking, make use of your precious human birth, isn't it, really? The situation you're in now, make use of it. You've got a good opportunity. And we kind of know it's easily lost, don't we? I mean, it's not just that our body is easily lost, our attention is easily lost. So easily drawn away, and we forget. So yeah. Now is the time to think about it. Don't leave it till suddenly at the last minute. All you can do is ring up and say, I love you.
That's enough though, isn't it?
What?
Just ringing up and saying I love you.
Enough for what?
Isn't that...
Well, maybe if you hadn't thought about it in advance, you might have just had a blazing row and hadn't even, hadn't spoken to somebody for a long time, and well, you don't know that you've got time. So clear it up now. Clear it up as quickly as you can. And also, just loving them isn't going to help them much, is it? If you've not connected them to Dharma, what really matters for them is they've made a Dharma connection through you, and you're making this strong wish that they will have this strong Dharma connection so they won't have to suffer endlessly in samsara. So if you think about it, you think, well, that's the most important connection with me that they have. Not their attachment to me as their friend, because that's not so important, but it's going to end. But their connection with the Dharma that comes through me, that is of lasting benefit to them. So now's the time to think of that and make sure that you're practicing and you are able to connect them to the Dharma. I think if we really reflect on heart connections, we're going to get it right, even without much doctrine. And then, when you do hear all this elaborate doctrine, you sort of think, it takes it to a new level of significance and brings other factors in that perhaps we wouldn't have thought of, but still, our actions are probably very much the same. That's what I think. That's what I thought when I wrote it. I thought even if you didn't believe in karma and rebirth, you could still relate to something like that. So now, this wonderful heart connection song, it's actually called Tendril Ningbo, Heart of Tendril. Ningbo is an interesting expression. I was thinking about it last night. I've struggled to translate it. The Ning is heart, and Ningbo is like the real pith, core, meaningful bit, meaningful essence. What was the term I came up with finally? I think I wrote it in the notebook which I've packed. What did I say in the end? I thought, that's it, and I've forgotten again. So it's what makes something really useful, proper, kind of, useful. It gives it real substance. Yeah, you could say that, can't you? That really gives it substance. So you've got these different pairs of connections, which are already good, but then when you add this third element, it becomes something quite, really something different. Something. This is where this word tendril or tashi comes in. That it's a whole way of thinking, actually. The word connection, I was talking to Lama Punsok about it, wasn't I? In Paul. Often gets translated as condition. Well, he was saying, no, it's really a connection. It doesn't change. It isn't something ephemeral, changing. It's a real connection, and then something can happen that actually affects it. But the real connection is sort of mysterious, like it's almost like a metaphor for something that's real. So each time we go through them, I was meditating on them last night and thinking, they're very interesting. And I'll start from the big top. So we all know who Martha of Lotrac is, don't we? Who is Martha of Lotrac? Yeah, he's a translator, yeah. He was a teacher of Milarepa, that's what he's most famous for, isn't he? And Milarepa's famous for his songs. So Martha of Lotrac, and he's famous also because he gave Milarepa a really hard time, didn't he? Number 12.
Tagmeva's husband.
Yes, Tagmeva's husband, that's right. So, and Lotrac was a place in Tibet where he lived. And so this is a song by Milarepa, so he's bowing to his guru at your feet. So that's why you have the guru on the crown of your head, so the feet, you can, you're honouring the feet of the guru. And also you've got this sense of upliftedness, transcendence. So please bless me, give your, may opening yourself to the Adhisthana to flow. And this mendicant that you keep in mountain retreat, again, this could be seen as a metaphor, but of course in Milarepa's life, it was literal. He abandoned everything that was mundane, and he went and lived in the mountains without. Sometimes he didn't even have food. No heating, no food. Just kind of wherever he was, that's where he was. And only practiced Dharma, only meditated and practiced Dharma. And so he's praying to help me to stay there, so that I'm not tempted out of that, or I don't come to any harm, so that I can't stay there any longer. So really asking for protection, and in the same way we can ask for protection for our practice, that we don't stray from the path, that we are actually continue to be motivated, and we don't have obstacles either internally or externally that disrupt our practice. We can pray for that. And many of you come to me and say, I find it really hard to keep my practice going. But you can always pray for help. You're always making that wish, please help, please help. And then knowing that just by doing that, you're creating an auspicious connection. You're creating the sort of connection that will make it easy for help to come. So you patrons here, this is what I was saying yesterday, the idea that if we're able to practice Dharma, it's because other people are helping us. It's very easy for us to forget that. We sort of think, well, I created the situations, I made the right choices, that's why I'm here and this is why I'm able to do this. Actually, we've got so many people we need to be grateful to that have actually created a kind of, like here in the West, we have a country which is on the whole is safe. So we don't have to worry about so many things that, I say we, I do mean we. There are people who have much unfortunate circumstances in our country, but and how's that come about? You think of all the things that people do, we're able to read because we're educated. We're educated because somebody had the foresight to make it a law that everybody should have free education. So all that everybody's done, the healthcare, everything that's been done, is actually allowed us to actually now be able to practice, have a space in which we don't have to work all day. We can make space for ourselves, and even if we're very busy, we've got access to books and communication with each other. We can actually turn, we can discover, find out about Dharma, and we can apply it. So when you think about that, you think, this is a mandala, isn't it? It's a mandala of all that society that's supporting our being able to study Dharma. You've got societies where they wouldn't allow it. There are all sorts of fundamentalist societies where you wouldn't be allowed to just study what you wanted, but we have got that. And in a way, that's part of the connections that allow us to practice Dharma. So you kind of think, I'm able to practice because of all what they've done, and then you come down to this later verse. So if I make pranidhanas for our society to become a society that's connected to Dharma, there'll be some power in that because that connection is already there. They may not know they're supporting me to do this, but of course those people who do know they're supporting me to do this, even more so. And I noticed that when I was practicing in India, in Nepal, how supportive it was to live in a society where people really appreciated what I was doing. Indians and Nepalis who'd seen me as a young woman, as obviously following a spiritual path, they would actually come up and thank me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. You're doing our work for us. This is what we're dedicated to doing, and you're doing it. So thank you. And that had a tremendous effect on me as a practitioner. Is what Dashu's saying. Knowing that we're all really rejoicing in what he's doing makes it much more powerful for him, because he's got this strong sense he's doing it for others, and other people appreciating it makes it, energizes that. Whereas if you're living, like when I was in Western-super-Mare doing a retreat in rented accommodation one winter, because Rinpoche told me to do a retreat on each coast of Britain. So I was in Western-super-Mare. And I had an Indian landlord, and he was so happy, so pleased that I was there, and that made such a difference. Because the rest of the time I felt a bit insane, because my values were so different from everybody around me. But he was so pleased, come in and he talked to me about God. So now this reminder, I have this precious, easily lost body, and it's supported by your help. So we are sort of one mandala, he's really acknowledging that. So then it's interesting, this sky and the earth. So these two things, and it says in the Tibetan, these two, it doesn't say things, these two. The earth, with its fruits and grains, so you think about that. It's a symbol for something. And the sky, with the rain, mist and rain, that then falls on the earth, and then the seeds can grow. So that's something quite wonderful and meaningful for the beings. It benefits beings. But then what happens if you add a third element, the Dharma? You then have got really something with real substance, because you've now got a mandala of awakening, haven't you? So it's the same sky, the same earth, the same potential, but now it's integral to the mandala of awakening. It's actually a vehicle for the awakening of beings, because the Dharma's there too. If the Dharma wasn't there, it'd be nice, but what would be the point of it really? But the Dharma's there, and the sky, and you could really understand that in quite a metaphorical sense as well. Like the earth, the Ratna element, and the Buddha element, and then this sort of Dharma, Vajra element of the Dharma teaching. Or even in terms of the three spheres, can't you? Kind of like something here with all the connections, something there that's actually meeting it, and an interface. And if on that interface there's Dharma, actually that becomes amazing. It becomes something that's like the possibility of awakening arises in that world. In our world, the wonder of the Dharma appearing in that way. And then it goes to the illusory body, the illusion of the body. So our illusory body, be more precise, the one that we were born with and our parents brought up, and here we are with all the connections. It's more or less what I was saying, isn't it? All that, and then adding the Guru's Menga, special instruction, that, I'm not sure if to grow is the right word for that. These connections are what allows Dharma practice to happen. We are actually, because of that, we're able to practice Dharma. So those are the two. So what's the third? The third is what we do about it. Do we really get behind our practice and practice, or do we just have this opportunity and not really put our heart into it, not really go for it? The word in Tibetan is heart bone. They've got this expression that when you're really committed to something, you're really resolved in something, you're really putting your energy to something, it's called your heart bone. So their hard heart is very different from our hard heart, isn't it? Sort of a hard bone heart that, really determined. So I translated it as wholeheartedness, because I couldn't do anything with heart bone.
What is the Tibetan? What is the Tibetan?
Ningmu. Ningmu is bone. So then we've got the next one is the again this Milarepa's environment of being totally separate from all mundane things in his caves. And his practice is not mere words, it's genuine practice, really coming from his heart. And these two, and I translated it my true heart wish, which was kind of fitted in better, but the actual word is Chisam Chub. You can accomplish whatever you wish. So because he's not distracted by anything, and because his practice is genuine, it doesn't actually say Dharma practice, it actually says Gejo, which is doing positive karmic action. So it doesn't actually specify its Dharma practice, but he's there doing this positive karma, undistractedly, meditating, and through that he can actually gain whatever he wants. So those two things are there. But what makes it really, important from the Dharma point of view is the third thing, which is emptiness. which is sort of think, oh, what's that? Yeah, how does that change things? You have to think, well, if you're only wishing for things that are worldly things, mundane things, you'll only get mundane results. But if you do it recognizing emptiness, you'll get a Dharma result. You'll get a liberating result. So that realization of emptiness is essential for this to be truly meaningful connection. Otherwise, it could be just more samsara, because you've got yogins going off in the mountains and meditating and gaining powers and coming back and becoming powerful gurus who, become quite corrupt and keep samsara going. So really, this truth of emptiness is what makes a difference. There's nothing that can be grasped. Free from the trimandala, we use it, trimandala, there's no, the emptiness of the one practicing, the practice that's being done, and the what we're doing it as the object of the practice. Everything is recognised as being emptiness. So now, Milarepa's endurance in meditation. So he's got his Ningwu, he's doing his practice, there's another word here for that. And then the faith of beings in all three realms. So that's the three realms, I think it's Kamsong. So the formless, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. So that again implies he's not on his own. This is, again, I have to emphasise that we tend to think we're practicing on our own, but that's not the way even the Buddha thought. You're not on your own. The whole universe is looking on. We're not separate. So there are beings who can see into our world. They can see what we're doing. We might not be able to see them, but they can see us. So these different kinds of beings in the three realms. It could be, your elves and fairies and nagas and all those kind of beings. They're aware of what's going on. Even animals are aware of what's going on. They've got their opinion about it. And then you've got, different kinds of gods. And even the formless gods, especially if you're doing good Dharma practice, apparently, when you're doing good Dharma practice, the gods become very aware of it. Mm-hmm. And even in a worldly sense, apparently, if you've got yogins who are starting to be very successful in gaining psychic powers, the gods start to get jealous and think, hey, hang on, he might get more powerful than me. They come and try and stop it. There's loads of stories like that in the Indian tradition. Mm-hmm. Trying to stop them making too much progress and competing with them. So this sense that it's an open theatre, it's not just blank space. When we watch, I'm saying this about Brian Cox, when you look at the Milky Way and the galaxies and everything and all this space and all these, it's so vast, and you think, and that doesn't even count in what's in other realms. That's just in our realm that it's amazing. But actually, every point in space can open out into countless realms of beings like we. Because when you look at the astrological point of view, we're tiny and insignificant. But from our point of view, this is our world, and it's got in itself it's vast. And that's where we really live. So it's the same, all these other beings, it looks, maybe on one point it looks like just a tiny point somewhere, a bit of, but from their point of view, it's this whole world. Worlds within worlds within worlds. And they can be aware of us. Maybe not as a tiny point, they might be aware of us as something quite amazing. So the idea is that they could be looking on and they could have real faith and think, wow, this person's really practicing in a sincere way. Milarepa in his caves in the mountain, and this is like a cosmic event, everybody's very interested. So those two things could be there, and that there's a benefit in that because, obviously, if we're practicing samadhi, and this is our mind interpenetrates with everyone else's mind, so as we become calm, we're actually benefiting the whole world, because then it's that element of calm is entering everyone else's world. So there's a lot of benefit going on. So then why do you need a third element? Compassion. For me, when I hear compassion, it's quite conceptual. I tend to think, I think of beings that are suffering and then I feel something for them. Whereas I notice more and more that Tujje, Karuna, is more the power of being able to remove sufferings of others. So when we feel sad when someone's suffering, it's because it's touched a power in us to remove their suffering that's kind of aroused. We want now to remove their suffering. Why? Because actually we can, but we kind of blocked off from our own power, so we're frustrated. So we actually get compassion fatigue because we're frustrated because we want to help, but we feel we can't, and then we get frustrated and then we just want to stop the whole thing. But actually, if that wasn't there in emptiness, there's nothing obstructing it. So as soon as it's just that power of compassion is all pervading all the time and has the power to remove our suffering. We might do this and that and we get less suffering and we think, oh, well, I did that. But actually you could say it was the compassion of the universe that did that, removed our suffering. Which is quite interesting, isn't it? That's why Tibetans always say, when you give them something, they always say compassion, because it's coming from the compassion of the Buddhas. Your kindness is coming from the compassion of the Buddhas. Like that compassion. So that element of compassion, it's not, if you like, it's not just emptiness, it's not just connections, but there's a power in that to remove suffering. This is bodhicitta, basically, isn't it? Emptiness and compassion. So that's the third element, compassion. So again, here he is, the yogin who meditates on rocky peaks, and the patrons providing his sustenance are the connections for us to awaken together. I was looking at that yesterday. Awaken together. Was that one of the ones? The heart of this connection is the sharing of punya. It's again that whole sense of a mandala, isn't it? That there he is, all on his own, the tiny person in the middle of all this wilderness. And then there's people who are actually supporting him to do that. And that, geographically it's spread out, but actually from the heart point of view, that's a very, very close connection. And the result of that is, because those two are so inseparable, as we help someone else to reach enlightenment, we are actually ourselves approaching enlightenment. It's not like, well, they're doing it, they'll get there first and I'm not doing anything. I am actually doing what I'm sponsoring. Which is, again, it's mandala principle, isn't it? It's like you create a mandala and it all works of a piece. It's a world. Everything is going towards enlightenment. So when that person becomes enlightened, all their connections will be affected by that. If we could really believe that, I think we'd be more motivated to practice, wouldn't we? Because I think one of the things as Westerners stops us being motivated is that we think we're on our own doing it and people not being benefited by it. Wouldn't we be more useful if we went round sort of doing something that's more in the foreground? It's very strong, isn't it? As soon as you start to feel compassion, you start to feel, I must get up and do something. It's quite hard to think, actually this really benefits others. Christians who really believe in prayer, they take that attitude that their prayers would be more beneficial than doing things, and that's very difficult for a secular society to come to terms with, isn't it? Doesn't seem right. But it makes complete sense from this point of view. Yes, it is the best thing that you can be doing. But what is the thing that's missing? It's quite interesting, isn't it? You've got the patrons and you've got the person practicing. So they won't be having a certain benefit because they're helping someone practice. They will actually get enlightened together. But there's a third element. I found this quite interesting. Why is that the third one? The sharing of punya. Because when we do our dedication at the end of the day, it's kind of almost like a sentiment, isn't it? You sort of think, may others benefit by it. It's like a pranidhana or a wish. So why does that make such a big difference? If we're helping someone to practice, what's the difference if we then dedicate that? The implication here is that it's for the benefit of all beings to bring them to enlightenment. But that's the thing that makes it really, really powerful. So, yes, we may benefit by helping somebody who's doing practice, but if we then dedicate that in the Bodhisattva way for all beings to reach enlightenment, it's like making it now forever. It's not just this mandala now, but it's like this is now connecting to the universe itself. That is, the bodhicitta, that's the fundamental nature of the universe itself, that is going to always work forever to bring beings to enlightenment. So we're really linking into that. It's a what's the word for it? It takes it to a different level. It's interesting, that, isn't it? That simple thing that we might forget to do actually takes things to a different level every time we do it.
So this doesn't mean the sharing of punya between the patrons and the yogin then, which you commented on before.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't make sense if it meant that, because it's a third element, isn't it?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It makes it something that's not just them.
That's right. It's something that makes this into, as I said, takes it to a new level. That's the only thing I could think of that it meant, and it's easy to read the Tibetan to imply that. So the compassion of a kind and gentle, a genuine guru, and the patient meditation of good disciples are the connections for holding the Dharma firm, which is Tempa-zimba. Tenzin, this word Tenzin, name, people's Tenzin. Tempa is like Dharma. Well, we know what Dharma has, a whole range of levels of meaning. Tempa is the doctrine, the Dharma doctrine, which could disappear from the world. In a way, the Dharma can't disappear from anywhere, but the doctrine could disappear. So for the Dharma to remain in the world, you need the teacher, who's a genuine teacher, who's teaching the students without, so that they're able to learn. And the disciples have to respond by practicing. Gom doesn't actually mean meditation, actually. Is that the word they use? It's almost like it's more means practice. It's a small point. So it's, I'm just thinking it doesn't have to be just meditation. It could be taking the Dharma to heart. And the students are, have the patience and kshanti and willingness to take it to heart. So if that mandala is of the guru and the disciples really genuinely practicing, then the teaching will remain in that world. So all the time that we're practicing like that, we're helping the world, the Dharma, to remain in the world. So it's a good thing to remember, isn't it? You know, that's the connection that keeps it a Dharma world, going back to the beginning, where if Dharma's there, then it's got some real meaning, this world has some meaning. So if we're really practicing well with a genuine teacher, then the Dharma will be there in that world. It will be a Dharma world, as it were. So now those two things are there. Dharma's there in the world. So why do we need a third to really take it to a new level? And the connection is samaya. Are you all familiar with the term samaya? It's in Mandala principle, isn't it? The idea of your sacred bond, your word of honour, your connection, your inescapable connection, if you like, your samaya. And Vixen Chikpa was going to talk. Oh yes, I was going to say that. I lost a bit of paper. No, I forgot about it. I forgot to mention yesterday, didn't I? That Vixen Chikpa, first of all, his absence, because he's normally here this afternoon, on the afternoon that we're here, but he's in Germany. So he'd booked that, and we'd booked this, and the dates clashed. So he agreed to come and talk to us in London, the Shambhala Centre. And not only that, but to my amazement, I said to him, there's this practice called that Trungpa Rinpoche gave when he was in this country, actually, and he went to Bhutan, to the Tiger's Nest Cave, monastery on the cliff edge, as it were. And he had this vision of Guru Rinpoche, and he, Doji Drolo, in fact, the fierce form, and he wrote a sadhana at a time when he was very despondent about the negativity of and materialism of the world. And this event, this vision and inspiration gave him the courage to carry on. So he decided to come back, and he was going to carry on, encouraged by Guru Rinpoche. So he wrote this sadhana. And I said, I knew Vixen Chikpa had received it from Trungpa Rinpoche. And I said to him, had he had the abhisheka for it? And he said, yes. He had literally had an abhisheka for it, with a biscuit tin. He said it was an abhisheka, and he got a biscuit tin, and he put candles on it, and he put it on our heads, and he told us this was an abhisheka. So I said, wow, from Trungpa Rinpoche himself, that's amazing. So, and he said, yes, and in Shambhala they say he never gave an abhisheka for it, but he told us it was an abhisheka. But since then I've heard that Sakyon does give abhisheka for it, so then I said, obviously, well, would you give it to us? And then to my surprise, he said yes. Wow, that's amazing. So then I said, so would you give it to us in Shambhala Centre this year? Yes. Wow. Didn't quite believe it. And sure enough, after a while, he said, well, I'd have to give a talk on Samaya first. So I won't give it in this year in Shambhala. I'll give it another time, but I will come and give you a talk on Samaya. So I thought, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Said, yes, please. So he's scheduled to come to give us a talk on Samaya. So I then said, well, okay, I'll give a talk in the morning about Samaya too. So now we've come to this verse, it reminded me that this is going to be a major topic. But let's see, what's it doing in this verse? You've got the Guru, you've got the disciples, you've got the Dharma in the world because of that. What's this extra thing, Samaya, that makes a difference? Interesting, isn't it? Why would this, the strength of our word to within that situation would make that mandala very powerful? And obviously if we're a bit, it doesn't quite go, because obviously if you're practicing with you're sincerely practicing and the teacher's there, so well, isn't that Samaya already? So I was thinking about that and thinking, isn't that Samaya already? And then I thought, I think what it's getting at is that we can sometimes do that for a period of time, can't we? And then we sort of get disenchanted, start to see faults with the teacher and with each other, and can't quite keep it up. And so the whole thing eventually starts to fall apart. So what makes the big difference is if we don't fall apart, if we all stick together and we all honour each other, respect each other, continue to help each other, and we don't just let it dissipate and turn into some sort of riot. Or, like groups can become quite divided, can't they? There can be quite a lot of unpleasantness that gets exaggerated because the group is so close. It's like a family, because it's so close, it can get particularly nasty. But if it doesn't, if it actually stays good, carries on, doesn't change, I mean, that's amazing. That takes it to a different level. It's not just a temporary getting together and liking each other and then splitting up, and it's like staying together and augmenting that power of that connection, which is what we're trying to do as a Sangha, isn't it? So it's kind of this whole idea of the Mahayana Gana, the Srimala Gana, the making the commitment, the sticking together to bringing people in so that they have a real personal connection, it's a real living connection, they become part of the mandala. That's what it's referring to, I think. That is important. That's how it takes that Dharma in the world up to a new level. That's how I read that.
So the text doesn't refer to it as the Sangha then?
No, but actually what else is it?
It is the Sangha.
So it doesn't need to say. It's obvious, yeah. So now we get more into Vajrayana type language, talking about the Abhisheka. In actual fact, you do get Abhishekas in Mahayana. And interestingly, I'll talk about this afternoon. Good timing. It's a great song, isn't it? Yeah. So we'll dedicate the Punya, and then if you could, what I thought would be good for the discussion, I mean you can discuss whatever you want, but I thought it might be interesting to look at those, those pairs and the third thing, and talk about that, this third element in each of these verses, like the Dharma in the first one. When it says divine, in Tibetan they say Hla-che. Hla means God. So I couldn't fit that in. God Dharma. So I put divine, but I'm not sure how it resonates really. But they call it Hla-che. Because God or deity in Tibetan is just the same as our God and deity, but they use it for Dharma too. So the Buddha would be included as a sort of divine thing. And we do use divine like that, don't we? We could say the Buddha was divine, could we? No, I don't know. It's all been a bit.
Holy Dharma.
We say holy, don't we? Yeah, I suppose you could say holy. It doesn't have the same real feel as. Anyway. Dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. You shine with the radiance of intelligence, skillful play. You are a fertile field of excellent qualities. You manifest an ocean of Dharma, with each point clear and distinct. In all 10 directions the melodious sound of your song reverberates. You sing the songs of the deep meaning of the view and meditation. Genuine spiritual friend, may your feet continue their playful dance. We beg you to always remain. Certain ten shingi padan shin, children down so